the stuff that we're doing now in just basic kitchen remodels or bathroom models, I mean, that was extreme luxury, even in the early 2000s. For example, like you go into a bathroom, there's 6 different kinds of tile. There's a floor tile, there's a curb tile, there's a niche tile. Like it's not just, a 12 by 12 on the floor and a mosaic on the shower floor, and it's curbless, it's a pressed pan. Like these projects are getting so complicated in a lot of ways.
So welcome to the AFT Construction Podcast, and we have Steve Tankersley on. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, Brad. Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you on. So Steve is co-owner with Heather. Heather's actually was a guest a while back on the podcast, and I know we've collaborated a lot, and you're co-owner as well as director of pre-con estimating. So it's going to be fun to kind of break down, how you operate, how we operate, and just, another perspective. I know you come from a commercial background as well, and maybe we'll start there. I mean, something before we got into this, Steve, is you were talking about allowances, which kind of intrigued me because I know one thing in speaking and meeting with you over the years is you're really big as we are, trying to get information, architects on board, designers, get involved in pre-construction, notwithstanding the reality of our world. Not everything is always decided, even as much as, ideally it is. So how are you guys operating with allowances?
Yeah, I mean, in the best ideal situation, everything's selected. We have firm fixed pricing on every single material. But when you build in like a 7,000 foot house, I mean, there's so many moving parts. You maybe don't have the cabinet, hardware picked. And so naturally, inevitably, there's going to be some allowances. But, first of all, we try to take a stance of everything's selected and everything's, bid out and it's, itemized with the actual price. But we do use allowances, and we're really transparent with that with our clients. We actually have a finished allowance worksheet that's kind of tied to our proposal. So when we're going through, if everything's picked, great. We're going to have it listed out as, hey, we're using, these MTech handles, and there's 36 of them in the house, and they're $180 each. But the client can see that what it is at MSRP before tax and markup, and it really helps protect us too. So if there's any escalations, or helps the customer too, if there's any de-escalations, if all of a sudden lumber goes down, they're going to get a credit back on what that difference is. So again, allowances, really just help protect everyone, but then it also gives the customer some transparency in the estimating process.
So even if you have everything decided, I'll give an example, even on the hillside stuff that we'll do, we'll have an allowance for like hard dig. Cause I mean, we have a good idea of the soils report and where we're going to hit hard dig, like caliche or rock. And, we're going to have to bring in, equipment, sometimes a jackhammer into the mountain. And it's hourly rate. We're tracking it, through our daily logs. Essentially, there is a possibility that we can be over the allowance, right? And I think with hard dig, it's one thing. However, how are you handling allowances? Let's say you have 100,000 in for cabinetry and it comes in over. How are you working through any overages or busts? It's easy when it comes in under, but when it's over, how are you massaging that with your clients?
Yeah, we start off with, full transparency. Number one, if there is a difference and it's over, there's a couple different trains of thought on this. Like it's like, hey, if it's over, you should get the markup on that and mark it up, whatever your contract states it is. We kind of just go at cost on that. We kind of feel like sometimes if there's an overage, it's really an unfortunate circumstance, and we're trying to ease the pain as much as we can for the client. So let's say we have a $100,000 cabinet allowance. It comes at $118,000. They're going to get $18,000 change order. Really doesn't, it does bring down our margin on the project, which is unfortunate. But then also it makes that presentation and that kind of sale to the client a little bit easier to swallow because they can see what we had and they can see the new estimate. It's really easy to do the math.
And from your commercial background, I know you have a commercial background. How is that, especially with your pre-con role, doing the estimating pre-con, what impact did that commercial background have just on how you're running the pre-con department of Tankersley now?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of background on myself. When I got out of school, I got a degree in construction management. I went into estimating, and the company I worked for, big commercial company, they put all their project engineers through estimating first because it really give you, a full background on the process and how to build. So when I came out of school, I spent, 5 years as an estimator before I worked in project management. And that gave me a great foundation. When I was doing that process of estimating, I learned a foundation of how to properly estimate, which is, really going down to digging into every single detail, making those detailed notes of the plans of what's included in the scope, number one, but then also writing the correct invitations to bid to your subcontractors with detailed scopes and notes, going through a pre-construction site investigation process, and really, opening the walls up if we need to, and crawling in the attic or going in, under the house. And when I worked in commercial, we called it free-con, because the company, this is 15 years ago, and the company I worked for didn't charge for pre-con services. They're just kind of hoping to get the job. We don't do that anymore. We do charge service for that at our company. But I learned about that pre-construction process, and we started applying it to residential. I think, you were one of the first contractors I met that was applying it successfully. And I meet more and more every single day, and I try to, educate our peers on that process. But, going back to our commercial background, it really starts off with detailed scopes of work, communication to trade partners, understanding your plans, spending the time to really dive in, because it does take a lot of time.
It's interesting. You said something that I think for many listening who may have caught that. You had talked about that when you worked on the commercial side, that you actually had bid invitations, right? That you're actually going through and truly estimating the project. This is something we try to make a huge emphasis on at the company. The reason I say that is because it's one thing to get bid documents, our CDs, our complete construction drawings, send those out for bid. But if we want to be accurate, it's way more important that we can go through and we actually can do the takeoffs, right? If we're doing the takeoffs and the estimating, we know what the scope is for metalwork, concrete, excavation. We can document that. We can put on an invite. We can put on a scope doc, send it out to our subs. Well, now they're not only getting just, hey, here's a design book, here's a building set of plans. They've actually seen us vet the project so that they can clearly understand what their scope of work and what we expect their bid to reflect. How, in commercial, you and I know it's very common. You have a pre-con team. They're spending a lot of time doing takeoffs. So they have a good anticipation of what the costs are because they're doing this. And then they're putting together essentially the bid invite with scope attached. The reality of commercial to residential, I'm sure as your company's growing, you're probably, implementing that a lot more. How does that look today?
Yeah, when I first started the company, 2017, I came in and I was like, man, I wish I had some kind of platform to be able to send invitations to bid. 2018, we actually found Builder-Trend, and that was one of the best things I found in Builder-Trend was that bid invitation system that they have in there. But when you talk about invitations to bid, it's critical to go through the plans and find all the little things that are in the plans that maybe your concrete sub or your tile sub misses, and write it out. So if you are getting multiple bids, let's say you're getting 2 or 3 tile bids, you want to make sure everyone's apples to apples. So make sure that they're doing their edge trim and a pencil detail, not Schluter. But as we grew, we found developing that process, it was just key, and just making sure that all the bids were, apples to apples, and we find that scope and implement those unit prices to develop a complete budget before we go out, present to the owner.
I love that. And it's interesting when you talk about, the joint venture of engineering. So in the commercial world, as we know, a lot of times I should say it's not often, but sometimes it happens where they're coming to you, Steve, and they're saying, okay, we have this project, where most of us understand that the engineer is going to be dialing in all the scope and specifications and details, and then you send it out for bid. A lot of cases, you're involved in the trade partners, you're involved in the suppliers saying, okay, steel contractor, concrete, let's VE this, let's design and engineer this together. And the reason that they do that is because, one, they can control pricing. Number two, especially with COVID, they can control material because the engineer may specify some sort of structural steel that you can't get or is difficult to make and fabricate, whereas there could be an option that's readily available that's a lot quicker. And so as you think about that in residential, the complexity of trying to involve trade partners in that pre-con process, is that happening? Have you had any success with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So with our process, we're budgeting continuously through pre-construction. A lot of times on those really key trades, let's say say we're doing a $2 million renovation. We're going to bring in the mechanical sub, the plumbing sub, the cabinet sub, the trades that have a lot of variable and a lot of technical expertise. We're going to bring them in early to help us budget this project and figure out, hey, other ways we can save money, or the ways we can not only save money, but maybe make a better system. Can we zone this AC? And so it's not heating up the entire upstairs and the downstairs at the same time. So we're going to have those kind of conversations early in pre-construction, but it's really key to have a collaborative relationship with the designer, architect, the owner, and us. And if we're not being supported by any and one of those key figures, this whole thing is going to fall apart, right? So if we go out to a job and we bring in, let's say the designer specified a certain structural system, and we brought out our framer or our steel sub, and they come up with an alternate one that might save some money, or might have some better aesthetics, and we present that to the owner or the architect, we want to have an open mind, say, yeah, that might be a good idea. But if they're shut down to that stuff, it's not going to work out. So.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. So what does that look like on your projects? I know that you and I are big proponents of having a really good architect and designer involved early in the process. Do you get any pushback from clients on that?
Yeah, sometimes. So if we do get pushback, it's probably not a good fit. I have a couple recent stories I can share of, really great examples and not so great examples. Recently we had a project, client came to us. It was a 5,000 foot home. They want to renovate top to bottom. And they want to keep it under $1 million. I was like, no, we can't do that. It's under, it's going to be at least, $250, $300 a square foot. So we went through this, and I brought my concerns with the design team, and I said, hey, they did hire us for pre-construction. We started going through the detailed budgeting, and this project was pushing close to $2 million. Brought my concerns up with the design team, and I said, hey guys, this project is double what the client said they want to spend. What can we do? And the designer pushed back to me and said, there's no way, that's impossible. We could rebuild the whole house for that price. And this was a complete cost plus fee proposal, so everything was transparent. And at that point, I knew that this wasn't going to work out. If the designer's not backing us, they're just going to sell us downriver, and they're going to help find someone cheaper, which is exactly what this client did. We got paid for our time, and we parted ways amicably with the client, and they were looking for another contractor. That was a few months ago. We have another project, a little larger project, with an architect that we have a great relationship with. And, again, project is, over the client's desired budget, presented to the architect. I said, hey, we're going over the client's budget. What can we do? We came up with some collaborative options, some VE, value engineering options to kind of bring it down. And then we present it together as a team to the client. It's actually this week. And the client is kind of digesting some of those options. And again, completely transparent. It's cost plus fee. And we're going to, pivot on that design, kind of meet somewhere in the middle on that design to make this project a reality for the client. So kind of two stories of one where a designer will back you as a contractor and you have that full collaborative team. And another one where, maybe you don't have that backing and the whole thing falls apart.
I think what's interesting about that is that there's ability you have today at this stage of your career and experience to understand the red flags, right? Not just as you're identifying potential clients, but also in the relationship of the project itself. So with that first example, as I think about the red flags there, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that maybe Steve 1.0, right? Early in your career, you're starting Tankersley, you need the work, like essentially be a yes man, right? You're going to figure out whatever you can because you want the project. At least early in my career, that's how it was, right? You want it, you're going to do everything you can. You're overly optimistic without understanding, okay, some things are already going down this, this lane that I know where we're going to end up. How has that life experience changed for you where you could identify the red flags and just be like, I could pull out even if it's going to mean lost revenue?
Well, I mean, we've had not many, we've had our share of nightmare clients. We can count on, one or two fingers how many we've had, but they're enough to scar you to say, look, we're going to stay away from this. I touched that hot stove. I'm never touching that stove again. So I think every contractor has to go through that experience at some point of a nightmare client to understand what those red flags, those pitfalls were. Pre-construction, that whole process has eliminated a lot of those potential clients. I'd much rather have a nightmare client in pre-construction than during construction, because we can pull out pretty quickly if we need to. But that process, and I tell our clients in the initial sales consult about our process. You asked if a client pushes back. I mean, sometimes they do, but I tell them this is your chance to work with us in a controlled environment, rather than the first day you work with us, we're demoing your walls or we're breaking ground in your foundation. And we want to make sure we're interviewing you just like you're interviewing us. We want to make sure we're a good fit, because we're about to go down a road that is very long and it could be very stressful. And we want to make sure we can handle that stress together. So that pre-construction process not only helps develop a project accurately and successfully, but also develops that relationship with the client, which is really key.
So as you think about red flags, and without getting into specific, because in case any previous client ever listens to this, what were some things in your opinion that made those projects not pan out as you had hoped? I just, as I kind of tee this up for you, I look back at my career and, I think there were a few things for me where I've had projects go south. One, was my failure to set realistic expectations, right? We've all heard the term overpromise, underdeliver, right? We want to be underpromise, overdeliver. That's the goal. And even recently we had we tried to move a client in too early, right? Because of things happen in personal life. And, whenever you do that and you kind of work outside of your operating procedure, or expedite something that's probably not in a position to do so, it puts everyone in a bad spot. As you look back, learning experiences, I know now it's allowed you to identify the red flags where you can pull out early. What does that look like now, just looking back on those past experiences?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I always look, there's so many factors, right? It's what the clients do for a living. Number one, we start with that and we go work from there. Sometimes if a client is in the industry, let's say they're a contractor, they're a roofing contractor, commercial GC, I always tell them, like, hey, we might not be the best fit. Why do you need us? There's always that, how to do this. Why do you need us? I start with that and I work way back to how they treat their spouse. If she treats her husband horrible or he treats her horrible, why are they going to treat us any different? And it's just, we look for cool projects for cool people. And as we work through that, there's a lot of red flags, but it's just really personality wise and how do you communicate? Are you texting and calling me at 8:00? Are you yelling at me? If you're already yelling at me in pre-construction, this is not going to work out during construction because it gets a whole lot more stressful. We had a job recently in pre-construction that, it's like, if you're listening to this podcast and you're a contractor, you can probably relate. Every job is, it seems like everything's over everyone's budget all the time. This project was over their budget. The wife was so upset about this being up over her budget that she couldn't answer her phone or call me or come to our office to meet to talk about some VE options and how we get down. That her husband called me and said she's so upset about this that she can't even talk. She hasn't talked in weeks or days, and that they're going with another contractor. Look, I mean, if that upsets you that much, our budget, then I can't imagine how this would be during construction if we find something, completely unexpected, or our project does run over schedule or something happens. So really, it's, again, just we missed a landmine on that one. So I
It's
think
interesting.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, when you say you miss a landmine, it's funny you say that because there's a lot of value in saying no, right? Sometimes it's a blessing, those projects you miss, because as you alluded to, we all understand construction, that it can catapult into something much grander and much more challenging, as you get into the actual build, and especially on a renovation where you're finding all kinds of surprises, typically, especially in some of these older homes.
Yeah, and you and I kind of operate in some different markets. We do a lot of renovations, not so much new construction. You do a lot of new construction, not so much renovations. We do renovations, people living in the home. I don't think you guys do. So we have a different mix of clientele and different expectations. And it can be challenging, but people are people in the end of the day. If you can understand people's personalities, we're really heavy in DISC training, if you're familiar with that, and understanding, who is a high D or who is a high I, and understanding their personalities and how to communicate with them best.
So walk through that for anyone listening that hasn't heard of disc training. Explain what that is.
DISC is it's personality assessment. It's like Myers Briggs. There's different kinds of assessments online. I think you take a free one. Um, it's understanding your personality, whether you're very dominant and you make quick decisions. Okay, you're a high D. If you're very outgoing and great rambunctious personality, maybe you're high I. S's are maybe more reserved and analytical, and C's are maybe more compassionate. And understanding those people's personalities. If you're working with a high SC person, they're not going to make a decision right away, and you have to present them all the information. If you work with a high D or high I like me, I can make a decision in about 5 minutes and live with it. So understanding those personalities and what kind of client you're working with, that's really key.
So with that, personality analysis, I think there's a lot of value there, understanding not just you individually, but your team, your customer base. I would imagine it's probably pretty unrealistic to, customer comes in and interview with you, Steve, and you're like, hey, take this personality assessment, to see if I want to work with you. But I guess what's realistic for you guys is to identify key factors, right? Key things, red flags, if you will. But internally, how are you implementing that to understand your employees' personality? Because I'd imagine that does impact how they communicate with the client. It impacts training and systems internally. How are you at least vetting, training, and just coordinating the personality of each of your employees at the company?
Yeah, we actually do DISC assessments when we hire. So part of the hiring process and part of the onboarding process is a DISC personality test. Doesn't have any impact usually on hiring, but we want to make sure that they're the right person. Maybe if they're going to be an estimator, we don't want maybe a high D, high I person who's going to make quick decisions and be very, brash, maybe a more analytical, more reserved person. So there's that. And then also understanding how they work together. If you're a high SC personality, how do you communicate with a DI or vice versa? We actually do those trainings. We share them with each other. We all know our personalities within the company. And we've actually held some trainings, every quarter or so of talking about, DISC training and how to communicate with this person. I mean, that's really the hardest part of this job is communicating with people. The building part is actually pretty simple. Usually it's working with people, working with clients, your subcontractors, your employees, your vendors, and making sure that their feelings aren't offended or that they're being responded to appropriately. That's the hardest part of this job.
It's funny you say that because anyone that's been in management of some level, and especially in the trades, especially as like a superintendent or managing suppliers and installers, there's this really fine balance that you have to be really pressing, right? You have to be, I don't want to say aggressive, but you have to be vigilant, right? And you have to be on top of things. But at the same time, you have to be able to be a little compassionate, as you mentioned. I mean, there's this fine balance. How internally, as you've done the DISC training, and evaluations with each of your employees, especially in the hiring process, how does that impact how you communicate with each member, you and Heather? How does it impact, direction of company procedures and training and implementation, knowing the personalities of each of your team members?
Yeah. So Heather she's all four. She's a high D, high I, high SC, which is really rare. So that's probably why she's really good at her job. She runs the operations for our company. Her and I, we learned how to communicate with each other. We've been married, over 10 years now. But within the company, when I'm talking with certain people in the company, I have to understand that person needs all the information in front of them to make a decision, and they need adequate time or they need a deadline to make that decision. So there's certain people in the company, I'm like, hey, you need to do this, this, and this because this, and this is who you need to call, and you need to do it by Friday. And it's very specific. Versus other people in the company, it's like, hey, I need to have this done. And they'll ask you, okay, when you need it done by? Great, it'll be done. So it's just understanding those key people. And sometimes when those people don't understand how they communicate with each other, it can create problems. And that's when you get a little bit of drama in the company. So we're always trying to understand, and it's also with your employees and your customers, and just that constant understanding how we communicate. That's the hardest part.
So you have to share some advice because I think you and Heather are one of the unique couples that have, an amazing marriage and relationship. You're running a company. It's hard to do. I know that she runs operations. You run pre-con. how do you have, or do you, clear definition to understand, you know, hat on, hat off, personal life, work life, at home with the family, on vacation, the how the batons pass at work, that balance that you both need to work together and thrive together.
Well, like the key, I mean, I'm not an expert in this by any means. The key is clearly defined roles, and it's like that number. We start with that, and so I stay in that pre-construction estimating lane. Heather's doing operations, so managing our project managers, our field crews, the schedules, and as long as we kind of stay in those lanes, we're usually pretty good. Sometimes our problems are when we cross over, and I kind of go to job sites, and I'm like, "Hey, why are you doing it like this?" And she gets real defensive, right? And or same with me. She comes over and she's working on something I'm working on, and I'm like, hey, I got this handled. So at work, we keep defined roles and we stay in each other's lanes and we try not to cross over, and we do a pretty good job of that. At home, I think we try to limit it at home. I think anyone who works together in a marriage and says, hey, we work is work, we turn it off at home. I don't know. I think it's BS personally, but everyone takes it home. We talk about it, but we also catch each other and we're like, look, I don't want to talk about this anymore. We're going to talk about it tomorrow. And we catch each other when we're talking about it too much, especially in front of the kids. We have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. My 7-year-old is actually in the conference room right now watching baseball. He's on summer break. So, it is a family owned company and we take that seriously. But, we try to leave work at work and we try not to bring it home. But, to say never bring it home is not always the case.
I do love the advice though when you said clearly defined roles. And as you were saying that, I was just thinking about any company. I mean, if that can work for a marriage, a couple that's operating together, running a business, it shows the importance because so many of us in any business, whether you're designer, architect, builder, it doesn't matter. So many of us in our companies, no matter how big or small they are, a lot of us may think, well, I'm a small company. I really don't need roles. But even if you're 2 people, 3 people, 5, or 27, it doesn't matter. I've seen that when we just had an evaluation from our Build to 20 came out, they did an evaluation. And as much time as we've spent in job descriptions and process, there was still overlap. Like double work is happening. People aren't sure who's responsible for what task and who takes, the baton. What I found, and especially in the last 6 months of really clearly defining and working on this, it's completely changed efficiency. I don't want to say motivation, but I should say at least happiness in the workplace and camaraderie. And not that we didn't have good company culture before, but it's definitely enhanced that. And so I can imagine that with clearly defined roles, not only does it work for your marriage, but it also works with your employees, especially as you've grown to where you are now at Tankersley.
Yeah, and Heather's been a big driver of that too. Where we actually done this several times because we have turnover, people come and go, so we're always constantly monitoring and evaluating these roles. But we'll sit down maybe once a year and we do a post-it note exercise. Everyone gets a different color, and they write down what they do every day. Just write down what you do, and you start writing notes, and then you start putting it up on the board on the whiteboard, and you kind of see where everything is, and all of a sudden you see that Brian's doing this and, Jen's doing this and they're doing the same thing. Like, why do we have this overlap? So we sit down and we start defining actually like, this is not your role, Brian, you're actually doing this. And it helps everyone come together and it's a cool exercise. Heather's come up with it. I can't take credit for it, but it's, we bring lunch in, we do it. It's like a 3 or 4 hour exercise and we talk about what we do and we walk away and we're like, you know what, actually that is not my role. We're doing this. So you can't just do it, but you can't just do it one time and say we did it, in 5 years. You have to do it almost every 6 months because it's always a value. It's always changing. You bring a new employee in the company or you create a new role. All of a sudden, those roles are always changing. We're in a similar group, Remodelers Advantage, and we just had our case study about a month ago. Everyone came to our company, and it was the same feedback. Hey, you're doing great. Your projects are awesome. Your company's very successful, but like you have these roles that people are overlapping on, and maybe so and so is not understanding what their role fully is. And that was kind of eye-opening for us. So again, that's like the biggest challenge of building an organization is just defining those roles, making sure everyone gets along and communicates effectively.
So you mentioned Remodelers Advantage. Explain what that program is, especially if there's remodelers out there listening.
Yeah, Remodelers Advantage it's a nationwide peer group, Canada and United States actually, and peer group mentoring. So we're in a group of maybe I think 11 different companies called a roundtable, and they're non-competing companies. We actually meet in little micro boards every couple of weeks. And every 6 months, we go out to each other's company and we do an evaluation and audit of their company. And we look at all the good, the bad, the ugly. So you have to present your whole company, all your org chart, your financials, your profit and loss, your WIP, everything that's going on in your business and also personally. And we've kind of become friends and developed these close relationships over the years. So it's almost like a board of advisors that we have. It's really cool. And I think that's been a big factor in propelling our growth, is just kind of through this networking in this group.
How long have you been in, and how did you get introduced?
Yeah, we joined fairly early in our company. We joined in 2000. Actually, joined late 2019, and so we didn't have our first in-person meeting until 21. I got introduced through a friend and mentor who was in the group, and kind of brought us in, and we stayed on, and we've really grown from there.
And I know you came out to Phoenix. I think probably the first time we met in person, we toured you around. What was the conference you were at here in Scottsdale years ago?
Yeah, that was a Remodelers Advantage conference. So they have a yearly summit and speakers. I think there's probably 500 different companies in this organization, or maybe more. Don't quote me on this. And you all meet once a year, and that's when I met you up in Scottsdale. I think that was 21 or 22.
Yeah, yeah. It was. I'm trying to remember when that was.
You're just
But
breaking ground on that modern sunset build. So
yeah. So with the Remodelers Advantage, I think what's unique, because we ever build a 20. So essentially there's 500 built, remodelers around the country. How do they distinguish what group? So when you go in and say, I want to be in my own group, right? My own mastermind, any idea how they kind of formulate that or match you up with certain remodelers around the country?
yeah, it's they really look at the personalities, number one, of the individual owners in the company, then also the company's structure. So there's a lot of, maybe there's architecture or designer driven companies where they don't have in-house design. Well, I meant put you in a group with more of companies like that. So you're actually, working with similar companies. Also similar revenue, similar, kind of similar status. So they're not going to put all the time a really green company who's really struggling with just getting their whip together with a lot of really advanced companies who've been in business for 20 years. You got to kind of work your way up. So there's different levels within the organization. There's like a mentor level. There's companies who are doing $20 to $30 million a year in renovations, been in business for 30 years. Their problems are a lot different than maybe a company who just started 2 years ago.
Now, rewinding back, I know you touched on this a little bit, estimating, one of the challenges a lot of us are having is just figuring out this climate. How has, I know you're building in Northern California. How is pricing, availability of trade labor, supplies, how has that impacted you, especially in pre-con?
Yeah. Like so there's been a couple of things. As we've grown, our projects gotten more complex and we've been pushed outside of our comfort zone. And that's certainly pushed us on our pricing. But, just a few years ago, you can kind of look at a house and be like, okay, we can build, the nice house for $300 a square foot. And, I hate using the square foot price because like they're pricing a car per pound, but, you can usually kind of gut check what something's going to cost and you're probably pretty close. So the balance we have, the struggle we have is that balance, because customers, when they first call you, they want to know what their project's going to cost, or at least a ballpark. So at some point you have to talk pricing before you're engaged into a pre-construction or design agreement. The challenge has been having that accurate conversation upfront and maintaining that through the process all the way to your estimate. So 2021, 2020, when prices were kind of shooting up, we had a lot of honestly, we had a lot of pissed off customers in pre-construction who I told them, yeah, your addition is probably $350,000. By the time we get through the estimating process, it's $475,000 or $500,000. Like, it's dramatically different. And they're like, we spent 6 months with you in design. We spent $20,000 on plans, and you never told us, what this was. And it caught me off guard. So we actually implemented a process about a year ago. We're like, look, we're going to do a budget check-in halfway through. It's linked to structural engineering. So as soon as the floor plans are done, structural engineering is done, but before all the finishes are picked, we're going to sit down. We're going to do a really detailed budget, and we're going to unit price everything on this project. And we're going to maybe get some cabinet bids, and we're going to get maybe some framing bids, and we're going to know what this project's going to cost within a few percent. So now what we do is we sit down with the client halfway through at that budget check-in. We have an allowance worksheet for the designer to work on, what our light fixture is in the entryway and cabinet handles and all that stuff. And we sit down with the client. We go, look, we initially said your project's going to be 400,000. We worked on this. It's 465,000. This is how we got here. Here's all our bids, and here's our finishes. And do we need to pivot? Do we need to cut back on design? Or are you good with that? And if they go, yeah, we're good with that, let's go forward. There's a 99% chance the project's going to go. We're going to have a contract as long as we're within a 5% of that number. So that one budget check-in has been like so just drastically changing for our process and our conversion rate.
I like that you do that. What I found here with architects, a lot of them that I'm working with, because again, what's happening is, as you mentioned, pre-con can take a year, 2 years. I mean, I have a project that's like 2.5 in design and architecture and permitting. And so you can imagine how pricing, availability, product changing in that time frame, right? That window. So the architect, what they're doing is they essentially are doing the design process. So they're working through schematics as far as, how the house lays on the lot, what it looks like, floor plan and so forth. And, that process can take 4, 5, 6 months, getting preliminary HOA approvals and so forth. But before they go to engineering, full CDs, they're doing a gut check, if you will. So they may have quoted a number to the client early on, maybe coordination with us. Typically with us, we're involved in that, like a ballpark, as you're mentioning. But now's kind of where the rubber meets the road still. It's not like I have enough information because I have no structural components, so I can't really hard bid it, right, for masonry and footings and concrete. But at least I can take what I have, use some historical analysis, vet with a couple of my trade partners, kind of see, and then we do a price check. So as you mentioned, Steve, the reason why this is so valuable and we're talking through this is so many clients will have this understanding that, I'm going to design my house and then go bid it, get multiple bids. Well, the problem is, one, a lot of times that may exceed your budget or what they're comfortable spending. So you just wasted all this time and excitement and emotional buildup, for something that may not happen. And then number two, without a contractor involved, they all interpret it differently, how they do their stem walls, how, products that they use, even though there's specification on the plans, a lot of architects kind of leave that open-ended. And so what's happening is now, being involved in the process, we can communicate the whole time with the client. And like you said, we had a client that was expecting their budget to be around, X, and it came in at Y, at that gut check. And it's a good time to do that because one of two things can happen. The client say, what I want, and we're going to do it. And I'm okay investing the extra dollars, or let's pull back. Let's make these changes to get within budget. And then you haven't gone too far down the road and wasted all this money.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think anyone, clients don't realize what it takes to put together a proper proposal.
Yeah.
I can do an estimate. My estimate is it's, X amount of dollars. But to do a proposal, it's going to take all these resources to mobilize and develop those scopes of work, like we talked about earlier. The biggest challenge in this market, and I think right now with any contractor, is just expectations versus reality. And I tell people all the time, like it says that even 20 years ago, 10 years ago, early 2000s, let's say, the stuff that we're doing now in just basic kitchen remodels or bathroom models, I mean, that was extreme luxury even in the early 2000s. For example, like you go into a bathroom, there's 6 different kinds of tile. There's a floor tile, there's a curved tile, there's a niche tile. Like it's not just, a 12 by 12 on the floor and a mosaic on the shower floor, and it's curbless, it's depressed pan. Like these projects are getting so complicated in a lot of ways that it's being driven a lot by social media and just these great pictures that everyone wants. And that's awesome. We love building those complicated projects, but nobody's talking on the back end about what these projects actually cost to put in place. So, you have a beautiful Instagram page. We do too. If I put price tags on what these things cost, like their minds would explode. And I don't think there's no one out there really saying what these things really cost. So a lot of times we're the first person telling them what this project's actually going to cost you. And it's met with a lot of friction, a lot of resentment.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's, as you said, buildings and construction is not getting easier, right? It's becoming more complex. There's more details, there's more finishes, and there's just so many products right out in the market that you and I have to be educated on. At Tankersley, being that you're in pre-con, who gets, who's typically, I don't want to say bearing the bad news, but Are you typically the one handling those conversations and hard budget conversations with the clients?
Yeah, that's me, and I've gotten a lot better over the years of having those upfront conversations of people who think, we still do kitchen remodels and stuff, and they think their kitchen remodel is going to be 80,000, and I'm like, hey, it's at least double. Should we even be talking? And that's exactly what I say. I go, it's going to be at least double that. Should we want to continue the conversation? And just having that upfront conversation and being direct. Sometimes people are caught off guard. It could be awkward, but I'm having those conversations. I'm presenting the budget. We actually recently hired an estimator. He's been great to help take a lot of the day-to-day number crunching off my plate, where I can focus on those client presentations. But yeah, that's me. And you never know what you're gonna get with people. Going back to our conversation, people's personalities. I present a budget. I don't know if someone's gonna. I kind of cringe. I wince, and I'm like, are they gonna be okay with it, or are they gonna? Am I gonna get a backlash, or are they gonna be mad at me? Are they gonna shut down? And it's always a crapshoot. So it's you just never know what you're going to get with people. So that kind of falls on me. And then once it's sold, it hands off to construction on Heather's side.
So looking back at just the organization, what's interesting is being that you really clearly understand your lane, as you mentioned, and kind of, scope of work for you and Heather. How do you coordinate hiring, per department? Because you may have a need in department, she may have a need in operations, and you're trying to factor out budget and profitability and everything that goes into cost, right, of hiring a new person. How do you coordinate and place, new talent where it needs to go, and just to make sure that everything you're bidding and contracting and pre-con lines up with what you can perform in the operations?
Yeah, that's a joint decision as both owners of the company. So any hiring process is together. We're not so big. We have 11 of us total. We're not this huge company. So we make those decisions pretty, just jointly. And we're forecasting, hey, we need another carpenter, in probably the next 3 months. We're going to start putting the word out. But that's definitely a joint decision, because that's the person that's going to represent our name on the building, on the side of the trucks. And so that's definitely something that we work together on.
That's amazing. And how's that hiring process been as you bring someone in, success rate? I know it can vary for company, where, and maybe so much not success rate, but where do you find your talent? People applying. How are you finding, so many good people that work at your company and are willing to, put in the time and the effort in, for the benefit of, Tankersley?
Yeah. I mean, it's just like our clients, it's word of mouth, it's referral. It's a little bit of a mixture, but most people in our company were hired kind of through word of mouth, except for maybe a couple. And it's just, we put the word out. We're forecasting way out. We're like, hey, I think we need an estimator as we want to grow. We're looking out 2-3 years. Let's start putting the word out. Okay. Well, when you put the word out, sometimes it comes quicker than maybe you really anticipated. And so, but we also use Indeed. We use LinkedIn. We use even Instagram. We've hired one of our best carpenters. We hired through Instagram, of all places. So just looking in unusual places. I've never had successful experience with Craigslist, for example, but it's we've used headhunters, recruiters, but the most successful is through word of mouth and through your contacts, through your trade partners. If you think you need a project manager, start putting the word out. Hey, I think I might want to hire a project manager. Do you know anyone? And be surprised at who turns up.
And, right now, especially with those you brought on, any of those tie back from relationships you had back in the commercial world? Because I know both you and Heather have ties back to your commercial days.
Yeah. Brian, who's on our team right now, we go back to when we actually worked at a large commercial company before together. It's hard for us to get crossover from commercial to residential. There's still a very large stigma in our industry of it's just, kind of people who aren't as good as us, and I think sure you probably know about that, Brad. And residential, I'm fine with it. It has a stigma. Great. Stay out of it. I want all the work. We're going to do a great job, but it's also hard to get people to cross over just because they feel like residential is not as good as commercial or is more drama or whatnot. None of that is actually true.
Yeah. What do you see as the biggest difference, between commercial and residential? not just clients, but also just, you know, trade partner support and vendor support and, just on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it's just a qualified, number one, qualified labor pool of employees, of trade partners. It's much more limited to find a good, for example, a good electrician or a good drywall sub that just doesn't wear shorts to the job site and doesn't drink beer. Like that's the standard, right? Just don't do that. That's hard. So if we can meet that, we're doing good. But also, it's the client experience, and I appreciate it. When we're doing small commercial work, let's say we're building someone's first, pizzeria or their first restaurant, we still have that experience where they're like really happy and this is like their dream coming true. But if you're working on a hospital or a prison, like there's nobody really there to thank you. There's nobody, really excited about it. They're just really contentious. Um, I have plenty of horror stories from commercial. I have plenty of horror stories from residential, but at the end of the day in residential, you're building someone's home, you're making their dream come true. In commercial, maybe not have that same level of attachment and happiness, which, I'm a people person and I love that. I want to be invited to the barbecues. I want to, just see you using your house, be friends with you on Instagram and see you, pictures of your kids having a birthday party in the kitchen. We did. I love that stuff. So that's the biggest thing. That's why I'm in this industry.
Yeah, I love that part. I mean, there's something to go home about. I mean, I think that's just construction in general that, it's a tough business, but at the end of the day, you get to see, someone realize their dream, right? And you get to be part of that. And, as the years go back or go, past, you can go back to these projects and see something that you worked on. There's something tangible there that you've worked on and accomplished, in your profession.
Totally.
So what made you get in construction?
Well, my dad was a contractor. My dad was a plumber, and kind of grew up with him. And he was a one-man show, and helping him in the summers and the weekends. I always thought I wanted to be an architect. My parents used to buy me the floor plan magazines at the grocery stores, and I would draw out my own floor plans on houses. I'm gonna be an architect one day. And then I graduated high school, and my dad was like, "Hey, just don't go in the trades." It's kind of actually discouraged. He's like, "You're gonna end up like me. I don't go in the trades, and I'll do something else." And so I'm browsing the catalog at Sacramento State University, and they had a program called construction management. I'm like, well, I like construction and I want to do management, so that sounds great. I didn't realize it was basically engineering, and I was horrible at math. So I struggled through college. I did graduate with my degree in construction management, and that's the best thing that happened to me. And I love it. I love seeing things get built. What we do is tangible. We're not working on spreadsheets and just turning them in, to see what happens. We're actually building something. It's really a cool thing to have. It's a really unique industry, honestly.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's funny that you say that. I don't think most people realize, because I did construction management as well, similar to you, and I don't think people realize that they're like, you're taking statics and, even in surveying and engineering, like the structural and mechanics. I mean, there's a lot of math. We had to take calculus too. So for those that are thinking of going that profession, or at least that way into the marketplace by getting a degree in construction management, do you feel that the education like prepared you for what you're doing now? I mean, how did that,
Yeah,
what's your take on that?
absolutely. The history classes maybe not so much, but the classes we took at Sac State, I combined with an internship. I was lucky to go to a college in a major metropolitan area, so I could take an internship while I was working. That was huge. So I worked for a heavy civil contractor building bridges in Northern California. It's like, hey, I don't really like heavy civil construction. I'm gonna go into commercial. And while I'm doing that, I'm also taking estimating classes and then doing real estimating in real life. I came out of that program ready to go. Our capstone class was actually starting a company. And so when we actually started our company, I'm like, hey, I've done this before. I remember how to do all these, business plans and stuff too. So really unique experience, but then also combined with that internship and that real world experience was huge. It's been a while for me, but I'm really involved in the program still because that was so impactful in my life. I still try to volunteer when I can. I have a goal one day, I'd love to go back and teach a class, at one semester a year, and just staying connected with the university.
It's so best advice you've been given.
Well, the best advice I've been given was from my mentor. He owns a really large construction company in the region, and it's just like just let the team take the credit. Don't it's not about you; it's about the team. And I try to keep that in mind. It's my name is on the company, but it's not me. I'm not the one out there putting the crown molding up, setting the cabinets. It's our team. It's our amazing team. So let them take the credit for these amazing projects. So that's really the best advice I've been given from a business growth perspective. And kind of the best financial advice I've been given is just buy real estate. It's that's been huge in our life financially too, and just buying the building we're in and owning our house and all that too. So kind of those two things have been monumental in our life.
So where did the I shouldn't say the education, but just like the information and your desire to be involved in real estate outside, the brick and mortar outside of just the paper contracting side of your business?
Well, when I was working in commercial construction, I wasn't real happy. I knew I didn't want to do what I was doing, so I actually got my real estate license before I got my contractor's license. So at one point, I was actually a realtor on the side. I was working on a $50 million project, and I was selling houses at night. And I was like, yeah, this is cool, but it's not really challenging for me. So I actually let my license lapse. I got my contractor's license in 2016, but I've always loved real estate and just the concept of taking something and developing it. Just the whole. Actually, I have my minor in real estate development as well from Sacramento State, and just developing it and the whole process from land acquisition all the way through completion fascinates me. So that's something I would like to dive into as I progress in my career.
Yeah. It's interesting. Do you have any aspiration? I know you're probably knee deep, and so busy right now with Tankersley. Do you think there's ever an option where there could be a little bit more real estate arm of the company or development or, your own projects that maybe be speculative?
Yeah, it's a goal of ours, and as a company gets going more and more, possibly building some mixed use and dipping my toes back into a lot of commercial work. So I could definitely see that happening probably the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think what's really valuable, though, something you're doing that I'm sure you could speak to is I saw this in the last recession, the last housing crisis, was there were a lot of construction companies that, they had a lot of backlog. They had a lot of work on the construction, but they didn't have brick and mortar behind them, right? They didn't have a building. They didn't um, have anything tangible, right? So that when the market can be challenged as it goes up and down for us contractors, they didn't have anything to fall back on, or at least have some, we say passive income, but at least some income that could cover cost. And, I think it's really smart for builders such as yourself that own their building, possibly have tenants in there that are paying rent. And so it keeps your overhead low. How did that play, into your game plan, just owning your own building, the value of that, at Tankersley?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like renting a house. You're paying 100% interest if you're renting your own office. So the opportunity came across our desk to be able to buy where we're at. We actually own a unit next door as well, so we have some room to grow. Or right now, it's a rental. Way I look at it, we bought the building when I was 37 with a 25-year SBA loan. So in our 60s, it'll be paid off and cash flowing. And that's part of that whole strategy of retirement, looking ahead and just different portfolios, and assets to retire off of. Because, construction, it's a great career. It's very rewarding, but then there's also, you got to have other backup options. And some of my colleagues do it through rental properties or real estate development. And I think it's a good thing to possibly look at if you're not already, at least own the building that you're in as an option and rent it back from yourself.
So, with that said, I mean, from your side, Steve, what is, upcoming and exciting for you guys?
We have a really good backlog. The market's still super strong where we're at. We have a really cool riverfront project for a great client coming up. It's a full design build. It's a mid-century modern house, originally built, I believe, in the 60s. And we're going back with that same vibe, but it's totally up to today's standards and codes. Full, I think it's a 2-acre site development. So that one's going to be really exciting. We'll be starting that towards the end of the year. We're in design development. We actually brought the architect in, and we're managing the whole process. So that's a one we're really looking forward to. Beyond that, just continuing to grow steadily our company. We have some other great projects on the books too as well. And we put it all on Instagram every day, but that one we're really looking forward to on the river.
So you mentioned the market. How is the market there in Northern California right now?
It's still strong. I mean, we work in the in the luxury market, and that market has stayed strong. I've definitely seen earlier in the year and late last year, I definitely saw a drop off in inquiries and leads on some smaller projects and more budget focused projects. Those certainly dropped off, and some companies that I know that kind of work in that space more saw a definite drop off. And about that last 3 months, I think people are more adjusted to the prices now and like just understanding this is the norm. And so it's picked up. It's just, I feel like it's busy as it's ever been.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, that's awesome. So I really appreciate making time, Steve. I know how busy you are, and to come on and, in your workday means a lot. So for those listening, how can they find Tankersley and find yourself?
Well, I run the Instagram page, so it's Tankersley __ construction on Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn, Stephen Tankersley. We're on Facebook, YouTube. So, Instagram really the best way. If you want to send me a message, that's me on the messenger, and me or Heather. And let's connect.
Well, I can commend you. I know, Steve, you spend a lot of time just in developing systems. I think it's pretty rare from my experience having networked with a lot of builders around the country, but specifically in the renovation and remodel world, what you guys have done, what you're creating, the operation size, and your commitment to excellence, and it's really impressive what you guys are doing. So for those listening, I think there's a lot of value in following Steve and Heather and
Thanks,
their
Brad.
team and what they're doing. So yeah, I can't wait till next time we get to connect.
Yeah, well, hopefully I'll see you in Arizona, right?
Yeah, we'll see you in Arizona when you come on down. So thanks again, Steve.
All right, thanks.
If you get value from the show, please support us by giving a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you listen to. And I also have a favor to ask. We've had some incredible guests that come on and share their wisdom, their knowledge about their business. So if you have friends or family members that could benefit from those episodes, please share it with them, as well as any other business owners that you're networking with that could get value from the podcast or certain episodes. Please share those as well. Again, subscribe, make sure you're following. Any questions that you have, topics. We've had listeners reach out about certain guests that we should have on the show. Again, brad.l@aftconstruction.com. Email me for topics to address, guests that we should have on, and even if you think you'd be a great guest for the show. So again, thank you for all your support, and we'll see you next time.